Hi everyone, my name is Aisling Murray from Leash Play Therapy. I'm based here in Portlaoise Town. I am joined today with Sorcha Cahillane. She is based in Swords in Dublin, a fellow play therapist like myself. Sorcha has shown a special interest in trauma-based play therapy and how it presents itself in the play therapy room. So today she's going to talk to us a little bit about birth trauma, memory, sensory experience, bonding, and then how play therapy helps this. So thank you for joining me today, Sorcha. Lovely to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Aisling.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we'll get started straight away if you want. I'm just going to ask you a few questions probably, and we'll just go with the flow of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I want you to hopefully share with the people who be watching this. What is birth trauma?
Mm. Well, I was looking this up, when I first became interested in birth trauma, because I was thinking, yeah, what is it? How do we know if someone has experienced a birth trauma? So there's an association in Ireland for the improvement of maternity services. And they would say that, a birth trauma is maybe a diagnosed, traumatic event that a GP or medical professional has said a woman has experienced it. But also they define it as if a woman herself may have several indications, but maybe not all the indications of a post-traumatic stress event, that she can still have experienced a birth trauma. So it's very much sort of in the eye of the person who's experienced it, and there's been research done in the States, around this, and they said that really it was such a personal experience that it was to do with how the person giving birth felt afterwards. So they may have felt, like Ames would say, they may have felt that their life was in danger, or they were in danger of injury, or
Okay.
perhaps that their baby's life was in danger, or their baby was in danger of being injured. So if those feelings were present during the birth, it can really lead to, that being experienced as a trauma. They also say things like if they didn't get enough information or felt information was being withheld, or if a mother, didn't feel they had enough decision making in the process, that can also be experienced as a trauma. And then there could be the physical elements, of the actual birth, if it's very quick and, rushed, or if it's very long and drawn out, that can be experienced also as traumatic.
Okay.
So, there's quite a lot that can happen in
Yeah.
just this birth of a baby that can really lead to people feeling overwhelmed or feeling like they've gone through an experience that felt traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, would you say like even I would come across a lot of families like they'd experience emergency C-sections or meconium in the waters or even ventouse births and everything. Like, is that all kind of birth trauma as well?
Yeah, some people would say that anything with a medical intervention could have been experienced as traumatic. But I suppose it depends on the mother. If the mother was prepared for a C-section and she knew that was going to happen, and perhaps she wanted it, for whatever reason, there's a medical reason for it to happen, and she may have experienced that as okay, so I think that's why they say it's in the eye of the beholder, the person who's
Okay.
experienced it. Whereas if it's an emergency C-section, it's not planned, it's not expected, well, that can be experienced really differently, can't it, to if you knew you were going in and you knew what was going to happen. So it's really down to how the mother herself experiences, but it also gets us thinking about how might a baby have experienced birth, how might they have
Yeah.
experienced an emergency section, or an intervention like the ventouse or the forceps, and what happens to the baby then, in that event, and how that carries on throughout their life. So I suppose that's what I'm curious in when I meet parents and they're talking about children and their behaviors or how they manage stress. I always get that sense of what was their first experience of stress in their life. How was the birth and how was the pregnancy? So when we think about memory, I suppose, implicit memory is what we all have when we're born. So it's not the memory that we might have from age 3 upwards, where we can remember an event or something that happened. You'll remember if you were bitten by a dog, or you'll remember if something very specific happened at that age. But under that age, our memories aren't really time tagged. Our hippocampus can't relate a memory to a specific time because it's not developed enough yet. So those memories that are from before age 3 are mostly just, held in our bodies, and especially memories of birth. They're a sensory memory. They're a memory from that actual physical experience. And they're sort of, laying down a template for how they experience the world initially. Is it stressful, or is it an okay experience? I'm thinking about what's done to the baby's body when they emerge into the world, if they needed any medical interventions, if they needed
Yeah.
different things done to keep them safe or well. Well, all that is on a sensory level. It's on things being done to their body, whether it's touch wise, whether it's breathing wise. So that is why when we think about how babies experience birth or how their template for stress might be, we need to look back that far to think about how that initial entry into the world was experienced.
Wow, wow. So like you're saying, like that it's stored from the minute they're born, everything. Well,
Yeah.
even pre-birth, really.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pre-birth. So a lot of research has gone into this, and they'd say that the last trimester would be where those initial memories are laid down. So you might need to think about what was that like? What did the baby experience at that point onwards? It could be they can hear things at that point, and their taste buds and all that are developing and developed. So you're thinking about that stage of pregnancy into birth and then after birth.
Yeah, wow, and it does hold on for a lifetime, really, so like one, I suppose part of our work as play therapists is allowing children to kind of go back into those held memories and wounds, if you could say, those little minor traumas or large traumas. How would you experience play therapy with the traumas of birth trauma and stuff like that? What way would you see it played out?
Yeah. So the non-directive play therapy is great, because what you do with non-directive therapy, and especially when I start working with children, I like to be non-directive. So you allow them come into the room and you see how do they present, when they come in, how do they walk into the room, how do they interact with you, and how do they interact with the toys, and what they choose to play with. And through that, they're choosing what feels okay for them. Do they want to paint something, or do they want to role play, or do they want to play with the clay or the sand? So you're looking at all those sensory experiences. You're looking at what do they feel comfortable with on a sensory level, and what do they not? And you're thinking about why is that. So you're looking for clues, and you're looking for an understanding of what their sensory, I suppose, comfort is, what they feel comfortable with. But a lot of the ways I've seen birth come into play is quite often through role play. So in that kind of non-directive play, sometimes children will begin to act out younger behaviors, and sometimes that might be, there could be baby bottles available and they might pick one up and start sucking it, so they feel comfortable enough to go back to a younger age. And so you're looking at that, and sometimes they'll start making little baby noises. They might start cooing and doing gurgly noises, and you're interacting with them as though they're a baby. You're thinking there's a need here, and what do I need to do? But sometimes I've seen them go back even further to quite a young age, and sometimes even what I would imagine is, in the womb and being birthed, and they've done that themselves. So the first time I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, what's happening here? I nearly didn't believe it, but at the same time, what it looked like was exactly what that child's birth had been like. So it's interesting when you see it, and when a child just does it themselves spontaneously, because it shows a real need to sort of reenact that, but it's not coming from a conscious memory. It's coming from what feels right from their bodies, and they're feeling really comfortable and safe, and they're just going with that and playing it out. And I suppose it puts a new energy on it. If it's an experience that has been stressful, or has kind of held a stressful memory, or given them certain behaviors that they've had to play out or act out, it's a new running through of that, and they may then begin to act differently, or not hold the same energies around the birth as they did before.
Lovely. Lovely. And could I ask, is there an example of one of those that you could share with us? Like how you've seen it in the room, or is that kind of confidential part for the kid, or?
Yeah, it's quite confidential, but sometimes it could be a child, in a tent, and they may be playing a little game from inside the tent to outside, where it could be touching hands through the sheet of the tent, so sometimes I wonder about, is there something being played out then from being inside mommy's tummy and what you can touch and hear and feel outside. That's a potential. Sometimes you're not making a judgment on that, you're just going, does that feel like that's what it could be? And then there's also actual, being in the tent and coming out through the tunnel, or maybe coming out a different way if the birth was different. So there's some of the ways that I have seen it happen, but it's more the feeling you get when they're doing it, and this from being a play therapist, what you're working with all the time is what it feels like, how does it feel, and it's not necessarily just because they're playing in the tent or the tunnel. Playing in the tent and the tunnel could be lots of different things at different times. But in that particular moment, it's what the energy is around it, how it feels, and what they're maybe asking you to do during that play as well. And, with the younger baby play, they'll ask you or they'll want you to coo back at them like you're a mom, and they might play through some of that bonding experience, or they'll look at you with eyes that are like a younger child's, and you're looking back and doing the mothering kind of behaviors with them as well, because there just might have been something stressful or traumatic at that time that just stopped their development there, or impacted it a little bit, made it more stressful, where you're sort of recalibrating some of that for them to begin behaving differently in the world with a new kind of template.
Yeah. Lovely. And just one thing just kind of came to my mind as well. I think we as therapists, we use it like the terms that we get stuck. So like, look at everyone, the whole world, like every person is human nature to be stuck in some sort of developmental stage. It's not like we don't grow or grow out of it, but when we revisit it, it's where the healing begins, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen Porges is great on this. He would talk about that our nervous system, stores up how it's experienced stress. And so it's sort of reacting to what its template is, for stress. So that it could be in a fight mode quite, a lot of the time, or it could be in a freeze mode, or it could be in a shutdown mode. And so you're thinking about children's behaviors, are they being overly hyperactive or overly aggressive, when you're looking, why is that? And maybe there's not an actual really proper reason. It could be to do with earlier stresses from birth. But he would say that by engaging the social engagement system, really calming that nervous system, and that's done through kind of the mother's voice and lullabies and face-to-face interactions, and all that really helps children to begin to work more from that safety system and experience things differently. And he'd also have done a lot of research with like preterm babies, babies who were born early, and he would have checked their heart rates, and he would have been interested in the vagal nerve, which goes from up here down right into the center of our bodies. And he would have noticed that in early babies, that their heart rate was different and their vagal nerve wasn't as developed. So sometimes their faces weren't as expressive as, other babies who were born later might have been. And then that might have impacted on how caregivers perceived them, because if you're bonding with a little baby but they're not being as expressive back with you, are you feeling like they're not feeling as loved, or you're not feeling as loved by them, and that can affect how we can care for little babies like that, and all that bonding in the early years. So he would have felt that, by intervening back in and giving kind of different experiences, you can provide new templates for children to work off. And he said play is ideal for that, because it provides so many opportunities to engage that system, and the facial expressions and the tone of voice, and any therapy, he said, because what we're creating is that lovely, safe, soothing sound and place that allows children and adults to heal in.
Lovely. I don't know about the people watching this, but I'm already being soothed here by the conversation. It's lovely. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sorcha. Where can people find you then?
Okay, so I have a website. It's www.cahallaneplaytherapy.ie. So it's Cahillane. And I'm based in
Perfect.
Swords in County Dublin. So you can check out my website or contact me with any questions, whether it's a parent or it could be another play therapist who's interested in that area as well. But I'm open to anybody who has any questions.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. All
Thanks,
right.
Ashley.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.